Delighted to welcome on to this week's TRM podcast Stephen Rothberg, who is the founder and chief visionary officer of the College Recruiter. College Recruiter is a job search site used by students and recent grads, founded in the US and in Minnesota, now operating globally. And Stephen is sharing his view of what it is we need to do in order to give graduates the best possible experience as they step onto the career ladder. What is the psychology of some of their decision making? And also, how do we tap into and build relationships with the colleges and universities that potentially can give us access to a pool of talent, which is pretty powerful in a candidate short market. Really interesting insight, fascinating journey from a fellow entrepreneur. A massive welcome to the TRM podcast to Stephen Rothberg, calling in, I thought from Minnesota, but it sounds like you're in Phoenix, Arizona, Stephen. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, Gordon. Thank you for having me.
So it would be really useful, I think, for everybody listening, just to understand the journey that's taking you to where you are now. If you just like to sum up what you do as College Recruiter, just very briefly, and then let's look at the journey that brought you here.
Yeah, don't sweat. So I am, my job title is founder and chief visionary officer. That second part is a little bit new. And I can explain sort of where that came from if you'd like. But what College Recruiter is a job search site for students and recent graduates of all different kinds of post-secondary schools. So basically anything after high school in different areas of the world. They might be certificates, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's, PhDs, etc. I founded the company 31 years ago, and we've evolved quite a lot over the years, as you can imagine. Evolve is a better word, not pivot, because we were successful. We weren't chasing after success, but as the market, economy, etc. evolved, so did we.
Brilliant. So let's go on the journey. So where did the idea come from? What launched the product? How did you launch the product? Where were the bumps? Where were the successes?
Sure. Yeah. So the earliest origins of the business go back to when I was in university and I was in a small business marketing class. A friend of mine was publishing things like calendars and coupon books and handing them out to students. I saw actually down here in Arizona, I saw a campus map being distributed by Arizona State University, which is a really big school in the US. And it had advertising around the borders of it. Brought it back to my friend, said, hey, you should do this. He had no interest. And I said, well, do you mind if I do this? Because it would be kind of competition for the ad dollars. And he said, no, knock yourself out. So I did it, really enjoyed it, made really good money. Then I went off to law school. Graduated from law school. I was practicing for a year, but my first love was always small business. And I had always intended to get out of law after 5-6 years. And it was like, why would I want to give up 5-6 years of my life to work 80 hours a week just to leave it when the good stuff would start to happen, when you start to actually have some control over the matters that you would work on. So I got out and essentially restarted the business in where I was then living, which was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In '96, so a few years after that, we were publishing these campus maps and we added an employment magazine. The maps hit the new students. In the US, they call them freshmen and or first years in most of the rest of the world. And the employment magazines that we added, those would hit the graduates, which in the US generally call them seniors, and the rest of the world, new grads, freshers, whatever. And then this thing called the internet came along, and we added an employment website that was not designed to be the main product. But as the internet really took hold in the mid to late 90s, it was very clear this was going to be the future of recruitment advertising. So by 2000, we had shifted. We'd shut down all the print publications and we were strictly online. Another really big change came about 5-6 years ago now, when we started to shift from traditional duration-based advertising, $75 or whatever to post an ad for 30 days, to performance-based advertising, mostly pay-per-click, and also programmatic. Those are two different things, often used together. So we became, we think, the first niche board in the world to successfully switch from traditional duration-based advertising to programmatic performance-based advertising. There have been lots that started with performance-based, but we can't find any that have actually made that switch amongst niche boards.
And your logic behind that was what, about making sure getting the value?
Yeah, the logic behind it was truly customer driven. So we had two large customers. One was one of the big rideshare platforms. Another was a big insurance company. And what they basically said to us was, hey, we're spending $12,500 a year with you. That was sort of our top package. You couldn't buy more than that. If you could deliver 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 times the number of candidates to us, we would pay you 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 times as much. We hire at scale. You can never send us, one of them said, you can never send us as many candidates as we would want to get from you as long as they're qualified. So we started to look at the product and realized that one of the things that was holding us back is that when a job board sends candidates to an employer, if you send 10 or 50, you don't have any financial incentive in the short term to send 100 or 200. And most employers don't want 100 or 200. They want, right, if you can send them a few really well-qualified candidates, that's actually the sweet spot.
Yeah.
But if you're going to start to send them 100 times as many, 500 times, 5,000 times as many, your cost of doing that really goes up. And you're sending candidates to that employer instead of other employers. It's not, an infinite universe. There's a finite number of candidates, and you have to buy the traffic in order to drive those candidates to those employers' jobs. So if we could get paid on a per click basis or on a per application basis, then we could use part of that to drive that traffic. Essentially, it became an arbitrage kind of a model. And it wasn't like we invented it. Indeed was doing it very successfully, and there were a number of other players out there that were doing it also. What was different for us was that transformation, was getting an employer that had always purchased on a traditional basis, the same way they did in the 1700s from newspapers, to trying to understand that the more they paid, the more they got. We're accustomed as consumers to look for products that fill our needs and are the lowest price. But when it comes to paid for performance, you want to look for products that fill your needs and actually are a higher price, because you're going to get more of that product, or you're going to get it sooner, or it'll be a higher quality. It's a very different way of looking at how to buy.
And so where's the business today? You've got clients globally?
Yeah. In the spring of 2021, again, driven really by customer requests, we started to accept job postings outside of North America. Until then, we were only accepting postings in the US and Canada. We had to do some tech updating so that we had cities, regions, countries, et cetera, around the world, and that we could handle different character sets, Some of it was even just the kind of lingo, CV versus resume, that type of thing. So in the spring of 2021, we started to accept postings in other countries. It's now about 10% of our business. So maybe 7-8 months into it. I think by December of 2022, I envision it being half of our business, sort of what we call internally international, but it's really non-North America. The UK is certainly a big market for us, and other English-speaking countries like Australia, New Zealand, et cetera. Those will be the easier ones to go after. We don't have to do as much on the sales side or on the technology side as compared to, oh boy, if we start to take postings or get postings in Russia, for example, the character set is different. So our tech would have to adapt to that.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, Stephen, I'm really interested. We'll come back to what your view of the state of the market is currently in due course. I'm really interested with your experience about the psychology of decision making for students or recent grads in terms of how they look at their next step. Because obviously, with the community of recruiters, I think it's really interesting the relationship we have with graduates and in what way we can best engage them, support them, add value to them. So what have you learned over the years? What are your sort of principles in terms of maximizing grad engagement?
Yeah, for decades, if an employer put a help wanted sign in the window and said that I'm willing to pay you, they would have more than enough well-qualified students or recent graduates to apply to those jobs, accept those jobs. And I think that was true in most areas of the labor market as well. If you're willing to pay something, you're going to have enough qualified people. What's really changed, very much so in the US, you've probably heard the phrase that was coined months ago, the Great Resignation. We see it to a lesser extent, but it's definitely still there in Canada and the UK. And interestingly to me, we hardly see it in the rest of the world. But what I think has happened is that candidates in these sort of more capitalist economies have for decades been forced to just sort of take what they could get. And they didn't really have much choice. Yeah, if they worked as a entry-level manager for one employer, they could work as an entry-level manager for another employer. But the reality was they were going to be treated about the same. The work was going to be about the same, and the compensation was going to be at the same. So is that really a choice? I don't think so. Now what's happening is that employers are discovering after decades of getting away with treating employees like crap and paying them like crap, that they can be fully, for decades, employers could fully staff despite that. Now, employers are discovering that they have to make a choice. They can either treat employees like crap or they can pay them like crap, but they can't do both and be fully staffed. And the candidates, including new grads, they know it. From the perspective of a new grad, it's entirely rational, it's entirely logical that when they're looking at different employment opportunities, that they don't confine themselves to one industry. You used to graduate, say, with a restaurant management degree and say, well, that means I'm going to be a manager in a restaurant. And if all restaurants basically treated you the same and paid you the same, that's just the way it was. Now those same candidates are realizing, with a restaurant management degree, I can actually go work in a retail shop. I can actually go work in a food production facility as an entry-level manager, because I don't have to be a restaurant manager with a restaurant management degree. If I have an economics degree, I don't have to go and work for a Big Four accounting firm. I can also go work for a Fortune 500 company in their corporate headquarters doing accounting work. And so people, I think, are waking up to the fact that their skills are transferable. It's very threatening for a lot of employers. They're used to having the power.
And therefore, what an employer surely should be doing is saying, this is how I can develop you in order to give yourself more options down the line.
The successful employers will paint a picture for the candidate, not just after application, but even just when they're first marketing the role, that we have a process in place. It's formalized, and here it is, where we are going to work with you to understand what your career goals are, and then we're going to help you develop those. I'm seeing a lot of employers taking a big step towards that, and I welcome that, and I think it's a good thing, where the employer says, you'll spend 6 months in this role, and then you'll spend a year in that role, and then you'll spend 3 months in that role, or whatever. And so the candidate can see that there's a path laid out for them. That's great. It's a lot better than it used to be, which was basically show up, shut up, and do your work, and maybe get paid out of poverty wages for that. So it's great that employers are being more thoughtful about career development for their employees, especially those early in their careers. But what would be even better, and I'm starting to see more of this, is employers doing that in a way that is customized to each of the employees. What if I don't want to go and work abroad for 6 months? Does that, if you're going to make that a requirement in order for me to develop my career, then you know what? I'm going to go develop my career for a different employer. On the other hand, I might welcome that work abroad experience. I might welcome spending 6 months in finance and then a year in marketing or whatever it is. But have that conversation and understand that each person is different. And people change over the course of their life too. What you want at the age of 22 is very different than at the age of 32 or 42 or 52. And employers need to understand we're not drones, that we're individuals, and that we have our needs and wants. And if they want to be properly staffed, they're just going to have to say, you know what, this is the new world that we're in.
And therefore, the organizational competency is surely therefore about the career coaching, the flexible pathways, interesting. And I don't know what percentage, and I don't know whether the stat exists, about those people who start off in a certain industry or career path versus those who end up in the same one. I would imagine, apart from those highly professional industries like medicine, etc., where you've got to put in so many years in order to get the qualification, that it's probably not that high.
Yeah, without a doubt, there are certain professions where once you get into that, you're stuck is probably not the best word to describe it, but there's some golden handcuffs there where it's much easier to stay in that industry than to switch to another. But then there are other industries that we used to think that, and now within this sort of COVID world, we've discovered it really was never true. And that candidates are easily moving. I mean, if you think about the person who might have been working in a restaurant or a pub 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, that same person is now maybe making more money with more reliable hours and better benefits by working in an Amazon warehouse. It's a completely different kind of job. But who can blame that person for not wanting to get home at 2 a.m, and having customers and managers treat them like crap when they can make more money and have better working conditions and better working hours in some other industry, whether that's in a warehouse or teaching or healthcare or accounting or whatever it may be. We all deserve to be paid. We all deserve to be paid properly and treated properly.
How good are colleges and universities, in your experience, at helping students and graduating students think it through in a logical way?
That's a great question. So there are some colleges and universities that do an exceptionally good job of it. The ones that come to mind are the elite schools, and the business schools. They tend to have the best funding. The other 97 or 98% are so underfunded in their career services or career development offices that it's almost insulting. The the cost of going to university in the UK is somewhat similar to the cost of going to university in most of the rest of the world. It's become more expensive, but it's still comparable.
Yeah.
And then there are some countries like the US where it's 10 to 20 times what they pay, what you'd pay for an equivalent degree in Canada, the UK, Australia, whatever. It's mind-boggling to me that universities don't see their career services or career development offices as profit centers. They see them as expenses, and that the more that they can cut from those offices, the better off that the university is. The reality is, if you graduate from a university and that university helped you find a good career path, 3, 5, 10 years in, when you're making really good money, you are far more likely to donate money back to that university. Every dollar that they put into career services comes back tenfold.
Yeah.
And yet the vast majority of universities just cut. And it's really a disservice to not only the student, which would be my primary concern, but it's also a disservice to the university's bottom line. And it creates a long-term problem. It's, the expression Pennywise and pound foolish comes to mind.
Yeah, no, I was working a few years back with one of the leading business schools in the UK, looking at their postgraduate program experience and how they dealt with their alumni. And it was absolutely fascinating because it was pretty non-existent. And it felt such a waste of all those years of effort from both sides, the university in providing the education and the student in learning, that actually the output of that should have been able to make the right choices, and there just wasn't that support for them. And it felt a little bit crazy. So there is an opportunity for someone, whether it's people like you or recruiters, to really help provide a service to build a relationship with colleges and places of further education. What about the experience of the candidates themselves? Because I know your sort of mission in life is to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to make the right choice and have a great career, which I love. Do you work hard on the experience that you actually give these students, the sort of before, the during, and the after, to make sure that they get what they want?
Yeah, our business model is it's somewhat like, say, Indeed's, but for that early careers audience, the students, the recent grads looking for part-time, seasonal internship. In the UK and some other countries, you also have apprenticeships, which are really not a thing in North America. And what we would call an entry-level job, one that requires 0 to 3 years of experience, typically for a new grad. We have a wealth of content. We have over 40,000 pages of articles, blogs, videos, etc. We do not provide career counseling on like a one-on-one basis. It's very much the sort of the job board, let's call it self-serve model. We don't charge the candidates anything. Our fees to the employers, therefore, can be a lot lower. The need is definitely there, without a doubt. And there are definitely a lot of organizations out there that do a good job of helping those students and recent grads. There's a disconnect in the market, without a doubt, because a lot of those services are, they come with a fee associated with them. Almost by definition, somebody at the beginning of their career who needs some kind of mentoring, career coaching, career counseling cannot afford to pay for it. And yet those are the people who need the most help. It's really, again, I look at the schools, at the career service offices, the career development offices. They're the best positioned to provide that. And without exception, the people who work in those offices all would agree that they are the ones who should be providing those services. But a lot of those offices, it might be a school with 5 or 10,000 students, and they might literally have 2 employees. I mean, how do you have a series of career counseling sessions of 30 to 60 minutes with 5,000 students when you've got 2 people? I mean, the numbers just don't work. So the typical career service or career development office, they might only help 10 to 15% of the students at a school in a year. And by help, I mean that the student like literally uses any of their services. So if the career service office has a career fair or job fair and the student shows up at that would count. If they go and use the job search site that the career service office provides, that would count. So at the vast majority of schools, the vast majority of students don't get any career development help at all from their school. And so, man, when you're paying tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for a degree, it's ludicrous.
Which again reinforces the idea of a specialist recruitment agency or staffing agency who has the access and knowledge about the market could add significant value to the grads in the specialist school. There's a real connect opportunity, isn't there?
Yeah, and absolutely, Gordon. And especially if that agency were to take a long-term view of it and not just be looking for the placement fee, on day one. And there's nothing wrong with getting that fee. They've done their work and that's fantastic. But if they were to also then stay in touch with that now employee and mentor them and coach them, then they can then create a better employee. They can deliver more value for their client, for the employer, for as long as that person is with that employer. 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, that person's now ready to move on. They've got a much more highly qualified candidate, a much more loyal candidate to then place.
No, it's a fascinating option in a candidate short market where people are looking for talent. There's talent coming through. Can we catch them early? Love it, Stephen. Absolutely fascinating. I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you.
Sure.
If that's okay. So the first one, you're a recruitment entrepreneur. You're now a CVO, Chief Visionary Officer. I love that. But if you just, for any entrepreneur listening, and we have a whole community of entrepreneurs, what's the one lesson you've learned about that you would share with budding entrepreneurs?
Manage by outcomes. Most managers, most business owners manage by process, meaning how many hours did you spend at work today? Were you at your desk earlier than I was? Did you leave later than I was? Are you working hard? There are definitely some jobs where how much you sweat is directly related to your performance. I'm thinking professional athletes would be one of those. There are definitely jobs where you have to be at your desk or at your station for a given amount of time in order to do your job. Working in a warehouse would be one of those. But the reality is, for most jobs where we're talking about university graduates, it's about the productivity. The productivity is about the outcomes. Did you get that project done? Is the project of high quality? Is it adding value? And it's really hard for managers to manage by outcomes, but especially in this remote first world that those of us who work in offices are in, managing by outcomes is absolutely critical to your success, to the success of your employees, to the success of your organization. And we at College Recruiter, we follow what's called the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS. And there's a whole series of books and tons of videos on it. We started using that 4 or 5 years ago, and just absolutely transformative. It's been one of the best things that we've ever done is EOS.
Love it. One book that we should definitely all be reading this year.
One book. Well, along those same lines, the book that's written by Gino Wickman, who is the person who kind of created the whole EOS system, is called Traction. I am not a fan of the vast majority of business books.
Yeah.
The vast majority of business books are 250 pages and should be a pamphlet. This one I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And virtually every page had really great actionable tips. You can see how that page is different than the previous 100 pages, and it adds to it. It's not just regurgitation of the same thing, so that Wiley and Sons can then get a book onto the shelf on Amazon.
No, I've read that. It is an absolutely great book, and as you're describing that, I am reading a book currently, and I just keep on thinking to myself, where is this going? I don't get it.
And the reality is, it's going to go into the trash.
Yeah. What I used to do in my exam was pad it out a bit. And then just finally, just any one sort of thought leader or business leader that inspires you that we should be following?
Yeah. One of the fun things that I just started doing a couple of months ago is I'm now a co-host on a podcast called the Job Board Geek podcast. It's for job board owners, managers. It's the podcast for people who are helping candidates connect with employers, not recruitment agencies, but job board, and that would include marketplaces, etc. And my co-host is somebody who I learn so much from him every time I interact with him. His name is Jeff Dickey Chazins, better known as the Job Board Doctor. And he's just got a very laid back, wise personality, and sort of is able to put things into context. I've seen that before in a slightly different context. Here's how it worked out. I love it.
Love it. Brilliant. Okay, good. Stephen, thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I really wanted to get you on because of your insights into the grads and working with colleges and universities. There is this pool of talent there, and it's an opportunity for somebody, if we want to nurture that talent and bring them into the workplace, particularly relevant in a talent short market. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time in Phoenix, and we'll see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much, Gordon.